300 years ago, the Velari Dominion told the galaxy that humans were gone forever. Every civilization believed them. The proof seemed clear and convincing. Earth had turned to dust during what the Velari named the Great Purge. Human settlements scattered across dozens of star systems had been hunted down and wiped out one after another. Every ship carrying fleeing humans had been tracked and destroyed. The Velari had done their job well. Ambassador Keithal of the Velari Dominion stood proudly on the diplomatic station circling the Sarah Prime. This neutral world held the yearly Galactic Concordate Summit, where leaders from 17 different civilizations met to talk about trade, politics, and the future they shared. The Velari had controlled this alliance with complete power ever since humanity fell. Nobody challenged them. Nobody could. The grand hall of the station filled with aliens of all kinds. The bug-like Morathi clicked their jaws nervously like they always did. The tall, slim Sirens observed everything with their huge, dark eyes. The lizard-like Kelvani stayed by themselves in a corner. Dozens of other civilizations filled the rest of the space. Keithal raised his forearms to quiet the crowd. His gray skin glowed under the lights as he got ready to speak. He loved these moments. He loved reminding everyone who really ran the galaxy. The peace we have today exists because we were brave enough to remove a threat before it destroyed us all, Keithal declared. His voice rang through the grand hall with practiced confidence. The humans were a danger. They were violent and wild. They spread through space like a disease. We did what needed doing. A young Siren diplomat named Voss turned toward his colleague. "Do you ever think the stories about humans were blown out of proportion?" he whispered. "I've read the old files. They don't seem as awful as the Velari say." His colleague shot him a harsh look. "Don't say such things out loud. The Velari have ears everywhere." Before anyone could speak again, every sensor on the station started screaming alerts. Alarms blared from every speaker. The lights switched from white to red. The floor shook beneath their feet as something enormous disturbed space nearby. Keithal spun toward the window. His confident look melted into confusion, then into something very much like fear. The sky outside the station ripped open. One ship emerged from warp space. It was huge, angular, and covered in battle damage. Then another ship appeared next to it. Then 10 more. Then 100. Then 1,000. They kept coming and coming and coming. They poured through tiers in space like water breaking a dam. Ships of designs no living species recognized filled the emptiness in every direction. The flagship at the center of the formation was bigger than anything any alien had ever witnessed. It dwarfed the entire Velari home fleet combined. Its hull showed the marks of endless battles fought across centuries. Scars had been fixed and strengthened and fixed again. This ship had survived things that would have crushed lesser vessels. Written across its front in letters 1,000 meters tall was a name that made every alien heart stop for just a moment. USS Retribution. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Daniel Hayes sat in his command chair and looked at the diplomatic station through the main window. He was 63 years old with short gray hair and gray eyes that had witnessed too much pain. Deep lines marked his face. Each one told a story of hardship, loss, and burning determination. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet skill. They had trained for this moment their whole lives. Their parents had trained for it. Their grandparents had trained for it. Every human born in the last 3 centuries had known this day would come. "How many ships do we have ready?" Daniel asked. His voice stayed calm and steady despite the weight of the moment. His tactical officer checked her screens. Lieutenant Commander Emma Hayes was his daughter. She had her mother's sharp mind and her father's stubborn will. 1,200 warships holding formation, Admiral, all weapons charged and ready. Daniel nodded slowly. "Open a channel to the station." His communications officer, Lieutenant Kate Morrison, worked her console with practiced speed. "Channel open, sir. They can hear you now." Daniel stood from his chair. He straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. Behind him, through the windows, the power of the Terran Survival Fleet stretched across the stars. 3 centuries of preparation had led to this single moment. "This is Admiral Daniel Hayes of the Terran Survival Fleet," he said. His voice carried across every frequency. Every ship in the area heard him. Every alien on the station heard him. "We are the children of Earth. We are the descendants of those you tried to murder 300 years ago." He paused and let the silence stretch. He wanted them to feel the weight of his words. "You thought you killed us all. You celebrated our extinction. You built monuments to your victory and wrote songs about your greatness. You told yourselves you had cleaned the galaxy of a dangerous species." Daniel walked closer to the window. He could see the station clearly now. He could imagine the terror spreading through its halls. "You were wrong. We survived. We ran to the darkness between galaxies where nobody would think to look for us. We hid and we struggled and we suffered. But we did not die. We grew stronger. We built ships and weapons beyond anything you can imagine. We raised our children on stories of Earth and taught them to never forget what was stolen from us." Back on the station, Keithal stood frozen in place. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Around him, representatives from dozens of species stared at the window in stunned silence. "This is impossible," someone whispered. "The humans are dead. They've been dead for 300 years. "Apparently not," Voss replied. There was something in his voice that almost sounded like hope. Daniel's message continued. "We have spent 300 years preparing for this moment. We have returned to reclaim our place among the stars. We have returned to hold accountable those who tried to erase us from existence." He turned to face his crew. His daughter met his eyes and gave him a small nod of encouragement. "We are humanity," Daniel said, his voice rising. "We remember everything, and now the galaxy will remember us." The channel closed. Silence fell across the bridge of the Retribution. Every officer sat still at their station. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Emma finally asked. Daniel looked out at the diplomatic station one more time. Somewhere inside that structure, the beings who had celebrated his ancestors' deaths were now learning what true fear felt like. "We wait," he said. "We let them understand what's happening, and then we begin." The Terran Survival Fleet held position in perfect formation. 1,200 ships carrying the last hope of humanity had emerged from the void. The galaxy would never be the same again. 300 years before the fleet emerged over the Sarah Prime, a young naval officer named Commander Nathan Cole watched his home world burn. He stood on the bridge of a small research vessel at the edge of the solar system. His mission had been simple: study the strange energy readings near the Uit cloud, take measurements, send reports back to Earth. It was supposed to be boring work far from anything important. Then the Velari came. Nathan watched through long-range sensors as thousands of alien warships descended upon Earth. He watched as they burned through the orbital defenses in minutes. He watched as they bombarded the surface until the oceans boiled and the continents cracked. He watched as 8 billion people died in one terrible day. His crew stood around him in horrified silence. Some wept openly. Others couldn't look away from the screens. A few fell to their knees and prayed to gods who didn't answer. "Commander," his first officer said in a broken voice, "what do we do?" Nathan didn't answer right away. His mind raced through possibilities and threw them out one by one. They couldn't fight. His small research fleet of 37 ships had no weapons capable of challenging even a single Velari warship. They couldn't surrender. The Velari weren't taking prisoners. They were erasing humanity from existence. They could only run. "Set course for the Galactic Rim," Nathan finally said. His voice shook, but his resolve didn't. "Maximum speed, no communications, no signals of any kind." "The Rim?" his first officer asked. "There's nothing out there, no planets, no resources, nothing but empty space." "That's exactly why we're going there," Nathan replied. "The Velari will hunt every colony. They'll search every system where humans might hide. But they won't search the void. They won't believe anyone would be desperate enough or foolish enough to flee into the darkness between galaxies." His fleet carried nearly 50,000 people. Scientists and engineers, soldiers and civilians, families with young children, old men and women who had lived full lives and now faced the end of everything they knew. They were all that remained of humanity. For 6 months, they flew in silence. They passed the edge of the galaxy and continued into the black emptiness beyond. Stars became distant pinpricks of light. The Milky Way shrank behind them until it looked like a smear of white paint against the darkness. Many people lost hope during that journey. Some took their own lives rather than face the endless void. Others fell into despair so deep they couldn't eat or speak. Nathan visited every ship in his fleet and spoke to as many people as he could. He told them they would survive. He told them they would find a way. He didn't know if he believed his own words, but he said them anyway. On the 203rd day of their exile, they found haven. It was a rogue planet drifting alone through the void. No sun warmed its surface. No light touched its frozen shell of ice and rock, but deep beneath that shell, a molten core still burned. There was heat. There was energy. There was a chance. "We can survive here," Nathan told his people. "It won't be easy, it won't be comfortable, but we can build something, we can live." They landed their ships and began to dig. They carved tunnels into the ice and built shelters in the rock below. They tapped the heat energy from the planet's core and used it to power lights, heaters, and air recyclers. They grew food in water farms and recycled every drop of water. The first decade was the hardest. Many died from accidents, illness, and simple exhaustion. Children were born in cramped underground chambers and never saw the sky. Old traditions faded and new ones took their place. The people of Haven stopped thinking of themselves as refugees and started thinking of themselves as survivors. Nathan Cole lived long enough to see the first city completed. They called it Foundation. 10,000 people lived within its walls. Factories produced tools and machines. Schools taught children to read and write and dream of better days. Nathan walked through the streets one final time before his death at the age of 92. He smiled at what humanity had built in the darkness. "Never forget," he told his children and grandchildren gathered around his bed. "Never forget what was taken from us. Never forget who took it, and never stop building. One day we will return. One day we will make them answer for what they did." Generations passed. The population grew from 50,000 to 500,000 to 5 million to 50 million. Cities spread across the underside of Haven's frozen shell. Shipyards rose in orbit. Factories produced weapons of war. Every child learned the history of Earth and the story of the Great Purge. Every adult trained for the day when humanity would emerge from hiding. Daniel Hayes was born 180 years after the founding of Haven. He was the great-great-grandson of Nathan Cole himself. He grew up reading his ancestors' journals and studying the fragmented records of Earth that had been preserved. He learned about blue skies and green forests and oceans that stretched to the horizon. He learned about the Velari and what they had done, and he learned to hate. Daniel rose through the ranks of the Terran Survival Fleet with single-minded determination. He was smart and capable and completely devoted to the cause. He married a woman named Laura who shared his fire. They had a daughter named Emma who inherited their strength. 3 generations of the Hayes family prepared for a war that had been delayed for 3 centuries. "The ships are ready," Laura told Daniel on the day the fleet was finally complete. She commanded the carrier USS Phoenix and oversaw a battle group of 50 warships. 1,200 vessels, weapons beyond anything the galaxy has ever seen, crews who have trained their entire lives for this moment. Daniel stood at the window of the Retribution and looked out at the assembled fleet. Battleships and carriers, cruisers and destroyers, frigates and corvettes. Every ship bore the scars of a civilization forged in exile. "My ancestor saved 50,000 people," Daniel said quietly. "He led them into the void with nothing but hope and desperation. He built the foundation of everything we've become." Laura took his hand, "And now his great-great-grandson will lead us home." Emma joined her parents on the observation deck. She was 30 years old with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. She had spent her entire adult life training for combat operations. "The crew is ready, Father," she reported. "We've run every drill 1,000 times. We know our enemy. We know our mission." Daniel nodded slowly. He thought about Nathan Cole watching Earth burn. He thought about the 50,000 terrified refugees who had followed a young commander into the unknown. He thought about every generation that had lived and died on Haven, keeping the dream of return alive. "Then we go," Daniel said. We've hidden long enough, we've prepared long enough. It's time for humanity to reclaim its place among the stars. The fleet engaged its warp drives and tore through the fabric of space. 1,200 ships carrying 50 million hearts full of hope and rage vanished from the void between galaxies. 300 years of exile had ended. The return had begun. Chaos erupted across the diplomatic station the moment Daniel Hayes finished speaking. Ambassadors fled in every direction. Some ran for escape pods. Others locked themselves in their quarters. Velari guards drew weapons they knew would be useless against the armada outside. Alarms continued to blare through every corridor. Ambassador Keithal stood frozen at the window. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were showing him. 1,200 warships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in the Velari fleet. Each one crewed by the descendants of a species that was supposed to be extinct. "How is this possible?" he whispered to no one in particular. "We killed them all, we burned their world, we hunted every colony, we tracked every refugee ship." A junior Velari officer approached with trembling hands. "Ambassador, our scanners can't fully analyze their ships. The technology is beyond anything in our databases. We have no idea what weapons they carry." Keithal's 4 hands clenched into fists. 300 years ago, his ancestors had celebrated the extinction of humanity. They had built monuments and written songs. They had told themselves they had saved the galaxy from a dangerous species. Now the consequences of that arrogance had arrived in the form of 1,200 warships. On the bridge of the Retribution, Daniel watched the station through the main window. His intelligence officer, Commander Ryan Cole, provided updates from his console. Ryan was a distant cousin descended from the same Nathan Cole who had saved humanity. The blood of their savior ran through many veins in the fleet. "We're detecting 17 species aboard the station," Ryan reported. "Most are concordant members who allied with the Velari willingly. Several appear to be enslaved labor species who had no choice in the matter." Daniel's jaw tightened. The Velari hadn't changed in 3 centuries. They still built their empire on the suffering of others. They still treated weaker species as tools to be used and thrown away. "The other species are not our enemies," Daniel said. "They didn't burn Earth. They didn't hunt our people. Some of them were conquered by the Velari just as we would have been." Laura's voice came through the communication system from her position aboard the Phoenix. "What about the species who allied with the Velari willingly? They celebrated our extinction alongside their masters." "They were afraid," Daniel replied. "The Velari gave them a choice between alliance and destruction. We can't blame them for choosing survival." He turned to Kate Morrison at the communications console. "Send a message to every non-Velari ship in the area. Tell them they have 1 hour to evacuate the station. Any vessel that wishes to leave will be granted safe passage through our formation. We won't fire on them. We won't pursue them. Our quarrel is with the Velari alone." Kate transmitted the message. Within minutes, ships began undocking from the station. The Saran diplomatic vessels powered up their engines and moved toward the edge of the human formation. Morathi freighters followed close behind. Kelvani science ships joined the exodus. One by one, the non-Velari species fled the coming storm. The young Saran diplomat Voss stood at the airlock of his ship and watched the human fleet through the porthole. He had spent his entire life hearing stories about the evil humans and the righteous Velari who had saved the galaxy from them. Now he saw a different picture. He saw a species that had suffered genocide offering mercy to those who had done nothing to help them. "Perhaps the stories were wrong," Voss said quietly. "Perhaps the Velari were the monsters all along." His ship passed through the human formation without incident. A human cruiser actually moved aside to give them more room. Voss watched it glide past and felt something he hadn't expected. He felt hope. Back on the station, Keithal finally gathered enough courage to respond. He activated a direct channel to the human flagship with shaking hands. "This is Ambassador Keithal of the Velari Dominion," he said, trying to sound authoritative. "You can't simply appear here and make demands. The Galactic Concordat won't tolerate this aggression. You're in violation of 17 treaties and 43 diplomatic protocols." Daniel actually laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Treaties, he repeated. Protocols, you speak to me of laws and rules. Your ancestors murdered 8 billion people. They burned our home world to ash. They hunted our refugees across the stars. And you stand there talking about diplomatic protocols. Keithal had no response. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be truly powerless. The Galactic Concordat was built on the corpses of my people, Daniel continued. His voice had turned cold and hard. Your peace was purchased with human blood. Your monuments celebrate genocide. Your songs praise mass murder. He leaned forward in his command chair. And now, Ambassador, the payment comes due. Emma spoke from her tactical station. Father, the Velari home fleet is mobilizing. Our long-range sensors detect approximately 400 warships breaking orbit from their home world. They'll arrive in 6 hours. Daniel nodded. This was expected. The Velari wouldn't surrender without a fight. Their pride wouldn't allow it. Their entire civilization was built on the belief that they were the supreme species in the galaxy. They couldn't accept that the humans they had tried to exterminate had returned stronger than ever. Send Captain Hayes and her battle group to intercept, Daniel ordered. They'll deal with the home fleet while we handle matters here. Laura's voice came through the channel. Understood, Admiral. Phoenix battle group moving to intercept. We'll make sure those ships never reach you. 50 human warships broke formation and jumped to warp. They would arrive at the Velari home world hours before the enemy fleet could reach the Sarah Prime. The Velari reinforcements would find themselves trapped between 2 human forces. Keithal watched the ships vanish into warp space. What do you want from us? He demanded. Credits, territory, resources, name your price and we can negotiate. You think this is about money? Daniel asked incredulously. You think you can buy forgiveness for genocide? You can't negotiate with us, Ambassador. You can't bargain your way out of this. There's only one thing we want. What is that? Daniel stood from his chair and walked closer to the window. He could see the station clearly now. He could imagine Keithal standing inside, surrounded by guards who couldn't protect him. Justice, Daniel said simply. We're going to dismantle your empire. We're going to tear down every monument you built to celebrate our extinction. We're going to free every species you've enslaved. We're going to show the galaxy what the Velari truly are. He paused for a moment. But we're not going to slaughter your civilians. We're not going to murder your children. We're not going to hunt your refugees across the stars. His voice hardened. Because we're not you, we're better than you. We always were. The channel went silent. On the station, Keithal sank into a chair and buried his face in his 4 hands. Everything his civilization had built over 3 centuries was about to crumble, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The hour passed. The last non-Velari ships cleared the area. Only Velari vessels remained in the human formation's crosshairs. Daniel Hayes sat back in his command chair and looked at his daughter. Sound battle stations, he ordered. The reckoning begins now. The Velari didn't know how to surrender. Their entire civilization was built on conquest and control. For 300 years, they had ruled the galaxy without challenge. No species dared oppose them. No fleet could match their power. They had grown comfortable in their supremacy. Admiral Kethval commanded the Velari forces from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. It was the largest warship the Velari had ever built. Its hull stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Its weapons could crack the crust of a planet. It had never lost a battle in 80 years of service. These humans have been hiding in the darkness like vermin, Kethval announced to his officers. They haven't faced true Velari might in 300 years. They've forgotten what we're capable of. Today we remind them. His fleet consisted of 200 warships that had been stationed near the Sarah Prime when the humans arrived. They were outnumbered, but Kethval didn't care. Velari technology was superior. Velari training was superior. Velari courage was superior, or so he believed. The 2 fleets met in the space between the Sarah Prime and its twin moons. Stars glittered in the distance as thousands of weapons charged and targeted their enemies. Sensors painted the void with invisible beams of light. Engines roared as ships moved into position. On the Retribution, Emma Hayes coordinated the human battle line from her tactical station. Her displays showed the position of every ship in the fleet. Green icons represented human vessels. Red icons represented Velari. The sea of green vastly outnumbered the clusters of red. "Enemy formation is holding position," Emma reported. "They're waiting for us to make the first move." Daniel studied the display carefully. "They want to see what we can do. They want to measure our capabilities before committing to a full engagement." "Shall I give them a demonstration?" Emma asked. Daniel smiled thinly. "Please do." Emma selected a target at the edge of the Velari formation, a heavy cruiser with thick armor and powerful shields. In the old days before the Great Purge, a ship like that could have destroyed an entire human battle group by itself. "Forward batteries," Emma ordered. "Target that cruiser, single shot." The Retribution's main cannon hummed to life. 3 centuries of technological development had produced weapons the Velari couldn't imagine. While humanity hid in the void, they had studied every scrap of salvaged alien technology. They had experimented and innovated and improved. They had built weapons that bent the laws of physics. A beam of condensed gravitational energy erupted from the Retribution's bow. It crossed the distance to the Velari cruiser in less than a second. The cruiser's shields flared bright blue as they tried to absorb the impact. They held for perhaps half a heartbeat before collapsing entirely. The beam punched through the hull and exited through the other side. The cruiser broke apart in a silent explosion of metal and fire. Silence fell across the Velari fleet. Every officer stared at their sensors in disbelief. That cruiser had been designed to withstand sustained bombardment from multiple capital ships. A single shot had destroyed it completely. "What was that?" Kethvil demanded. "What kind of weapon can do that?" His tactical officer had no answer. The energy readings made no sense. The damage was impossible. Everything they knew about warfare had just become outdated. Daniel opened a channel to the Velari fleet. "That was a warning shot. You have one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that resists will be destroyed." Kethvil's pride wouldn't allow him to accept such terms. He had spent his entire career believing in Velari superiority. He couldn't admit that a species they had tried to exterminate was now vastly more powerful. "All ships attack," he roared. "Concentrate fire on the human flagship, destroy it, and the rest will flee." The Velari fleet surged forward. 200 warships opened fire with everything they had. Missiles streaked across the void. Plasma beams carved through space. Kinetic rounds accelerated to incredible speeds. A wall of destruction descended upon the Retribution. The human flagship didn't move. Its shields absorbed the incoming fire without apparent effort. Explosions blossomed across its energy barriers and faded away. Not a single weapon penetrated to the hull beneath. "Their weapons are the same ones they used 300 years ago," Ryan Cole observed. "They never improved, they never evolved, they had no rivals to push them forward." That was the Velari's fatal mistake. After they destroyed humanity, they became the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy. No species challenged their dominance. No enemy threatened their borders. They grew lazy and comfortable. Their technology stagnated while humanity, fighting for survival in the void, advanced at incredible speed. "Return fire," Daniel ordered. "All batteries, show them what 300 years of progress looks like." The human fleet responded as one. 1,200 warships unleashed weapons that made the Velari arsenal look like toys. Gravitational beams tore through shields and armor alike. Antimatter torpedoes detonated with the force of small suns. Electromagnetic pulses disabled enemy systems before the killing shots arrived. Velari ships exploded in rapid succession. Destroyers vanished in bursts of flame. Cruisers split apart under focused fire. Even the massive battleships that formed the core of the enemy formation couldn't withstand the human assault. Kethvil watched his fleet crumble around him. "This is impossible," he whispered. "We are the masters of the galaxy. We can't be defeated by ghosts." The Eternal Dominion launched every weapon it carried at the Retribution. Missiles and beams and rounds converged on the human flagship in a storm of destruction. For a moment, the Retribution disappeared behind a wall of explosions. Then the smoke cleared and the human ship emerged unharmed. "Target the Eternal Dominion," Daniel ordered calmly. "All forward batteries." Emma input the targeting solution. "Weapons locked, fire." A dozen gravitational beams struck the Eternal Dominion simultaneously. Its shields lasted less than a second. The beams carved through deck after deck, leaving molten wounds in their wake. Secondary explosions tore through the ship's interior. The engines failed. The weapons fell silent. The Eternal Dominion began to drift. Inside the dying flagship, Kethvil stood at the window and watched the human fleet advance. He understood now that everything he believed had been a lie. The Velari weren't superior. They had simply been lucky enough to face enemies weaker than themselves. Against a species forged in exile and tempered by suffering, they were nothing. "We made a mistake," he said quietly. 300 years ago, we made a terrible mistake." The Eternal Dominion broke apart. Kethvil died without ever learning how right he was. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it ended, not a single Velari warship remained operational. Some had been destroyed. Others had surrendered. A handful had tried to flee, but human ships were faster and caught them easily. Laura's voice came through the communication system. "Phoenix Battle Group reporting. The Velari home fleet has been neutralized. Minimal casualties on our side." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. It was done. The species that had tried to erase humanity from existence had been broken. Their military power was gone. Their empire would soon follow. "Send a message to every system in the Concordat," Daniel ordered. "Tell them the Velari Dominion has fallen. Tell them humanity has returned. And tell them we come not as conquerors but as liberators." Emma looked at her father with something like wonder. "We actually did it. After 300 years, we actually won." Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. "The hard part is just beginning. Anyone can win a war. The real challenge is winning the peace that comes after." The Velari Dominion collapsed faster than anyone expected. For 300 years, they had ruled the galaxy through fear and force. Every species obeyed them because the consequences of disobedience were too terrible to contemplate. But fear only works as long as the one being feared remains powerful. Once the human fleet shattered that illusion, everything changed. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. The Velari home fleet had been destroyed. Their legendary flagship was gone. Their supreme admiral was dead. The species they had proclaimed extinct had returned with weapons beyond comprehension. Suddenly, the masters of the galaxy looked very weak indeed. The enslaved species rose first. The Choron miners on dozens of industrial worlds threw off their chains and attacked their Velari overseers. The Delaney factory workers sabotaged the war machines they had been forced to build. The Neth agricultural laborers burned the crops intended to feed Velari armies. Centuries of oppression fueled their rage. Then the allied species began to reconsider their positions. The Morathi quietly withdrew their diplomatic support. The Kelvani closed their borders to Velari ships. One by one, the members of the Galactic Concordat distanced themselves from the falling empire. Nobody wanted to be associated with the losers of this war. Within weeks, the Velari controlled nothing beyond their home world and a handful of nearby colonies. Their fleets were gone. Their allies had abandoned them. Their subjects had revolted. 300 years of control crumbled like sand castles before a rising tide. Daniel Hayes watched it all from the bridge of the Retribution. Part of him felt satisfaction. The beings who had murdered his ancestors were finally facing the consequences of their crimes. But another part felt something unexpected, something that might have been pity. "They look so small now," he said to Laura during a quiet moment. "When I was a child, the stories made them sound like monsters, giants who walked across the galaxy, destroying everything in their path. Now they just look like frightened people waiting for the end." Laura took his hand. "What do you want to do with them?" It was the question everyone was asking. The Velari had committed genocide against humanity. They had murdered 8 billion people without mercy. They had hunted refugees and destroyed colonies and celebrated extinction. By any measure, they deserved the same fate they had inflicted on others. But Daniel remembered the words his ancestor Nathan Cole had written in his journals 3 centuries ago. Revenge is a poison that destroys the one who drinks it. If we become like our enemies, we lose ourselves. We're going to show them mercy, Daniel said finally. Not because they deserve it, but because we deserve better than to become what they were. The new Galactic Council assembled on the Sarah Prime 1 month after the battle. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to hear what humanity wanted. The young Thesaran diplomat Voss had become something of a spokesperson for the non-Velari species. He stood at the front of the assembly as Daniel approached the podium. "Admiral Hayes," Voss said formally, "your people have every right to demand vengeance. The Velari committed terrible crimes against your species. Nobody would blame you for wanting them to suffer as you suffered." Daniel looked out at the assembled delegates. Some watched him with fear, others with curiosity, a few with something that might have been hope. 300 years ago, my ancestor Nathan Cole saved 50,000 people from extinction. He could have stayed and fought. He could have died with honor defending Earth. Instead, he ran. He preserved what little remained of our species. He chose survival over glory. He paused to let his words settle. "I won't dishonor his sacrifice by becoming the very thing we fled. The Velari wanted to erase humanity from the galaxy. We won't erase them. We won't slaughter their civilians. We won't murder their children. We won't hunt their refugees across the stars." A murmur ran through the assembly. This wasn't what they expected. "But there will be consequences," Daniel continued. "The Velari will be confined to their home world and their original colonies. They'll surrender all technology capable of interstellar war. They'll release every enslaved species. They'll tear down every monument celebrating our extinction. They'll never again threaten any other people." He looked directly at the Velari representative who sat in the corner of the chamber. Ambassador Keithal had survived the war and now faced the humiliation of negotiating his civilization's surrender. "This isn't mercy given freely," Daniel said. "This is justice tempered by wisdom. We could destroy you completely. We choose not to. Remember that choice. Remember it every day for the rest of your civilization's existence." Keithal said nothing. There was nothing to say. The council voted to accept humanity into the galactic community. The Velari surrendered unconditionally. Their empire became a footnote in history. Their monuments came down. Their songs of victory were silenced forever. 1 year later, Daniel stood on the surface of a new world. The planet had been discovered during the cleanup operations following the war. It orbited a yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. It had blue oceans and green continents and a sky that reminded people of the oldest records of Earth. They called it New Terra. Millions of humans descended from orbit to walk on their new home world. For generations, they had lived beneath the ice of Haven, dreaming of open skies and fresh air. Now those dreams became reality. Children ran through grass for the first time. Parents wept at the sight of clouds drifting overhead. Old men and women touched the soil with trembling hands. Emma found her father standing alone on a hillside outside the first settlement. The sun was setting and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Daniel watched it in silence. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked. Daniel smiled. It was the first genuine smile he had worn in years. "I'm thinking about Nathan."